I lost Katie once. I cannot tell you the panic that gripped my gut. Maybe I don't need to. I mean, if you're a parent and have ever lost your kid in the city, you know the feeling. She was 6 years old, and we were in New York City near the end of the morning rush hour, walking out of Grand Central Station. It was loud, it was busy, it was incredibly crowded. We were shoulder to shoulder trying to make our way out onto the street so we could get our bearings. It was 20 years ago, and maybe I just wanted to block out the memory so I don't remember the exact details. I just remember thinking she was behind me, and I turned around and nothing. She was nowhere to be found. And to scream her name would have been futile. I mean, it was so chaotic. I didn't know if she had wandered off or if someone grabbed her and took off. In all my years of being a parent, I don't know if I've ever been more sick. I mean, it was horrible. And what's worse, Rhonda wasn't with us. Can you imagine having to make that phone call? Well, for those of you who know our family, you know Katie is still around. So, I mean, she got married. She started a life for herself. All's well that ends well, right? Well, I still can't think about it without the knot collecting in my stomach.
I guess I can recall a lot of times in my life when I've been saved by other people. I was 12 when my mom left our family, and all through my life I can look back and see different women at different points in my life that I know God put there to fill, what maybe my mom would have done for me. And almost every single one of them pointed me towards Him. I can think of some that maybe just cared for me and gave me food and a home to, call home, but only because I was in the Air Force, not because I was homeless. But that mostly all pointed me towards Christ and keeping me going in that direction.
I have two questions for you tonight. Number one, do you know what it's like to ache for a lost person? In Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells a story about a shepherd who had 100 sheep and loses one. And the shepherd goes out and searches and searches. He doesn't stop searching until he finds the one out of 100 that's lost. Now, speaking of parenting, imagine your family goes to Six Flags Great America with all 4 of your children, and you get home and only 3 climb out of the car and go into the house. Well, 3 out of 4 ain't bad, right? Wrong. I mean, I don't care how many children you have, you're not okay until all of them are safe at home where they belong. Well, we're nearing the end of our series on ownership, and we've come to the 5th core value in fulfilling the mission to help people more fully connect to God, His church, and His world. And it's this one: found people find people. At Grace Fellowship, we believe that all people matter to God. Therefore, they should matter to us. But let's be honest, evangelism is hard. It's scary. Most of us feel ill, prepared, and inadequate to talk about our faith. That's why the story of Philip and Nathaniel in the Gospels is so helpful to us. Here's the Reader's Digest version. Jesus finds Philip, and Philip finds Nathaniel. Now, Nathaniel's not quite sure about the whole thing, so Philip just says to Nathaniel, well, come see for yourself. Now, the question is, Nathaniel had his doubts. What caused him to take the next step to investigate? Well, I think it was Philip's excitement about being found. Do you know what it's like to be found?
I was found in Christ. I guess I feel like I've always known who He was, only because of who people told me He was. I believed them. I took them at their word. But I feel like when I was really found by Christ is when I met Him at age 33. I had come to a point in my life where I no longer could pick up the pieces for me or for anybody else, and I then had to rely on the God who everybody told me that He was. I had to figure it out for myself, and when I met Him, He absolutely saved me.
I went to the city one day with my mom. My siblings were in school, so I'm thinking I had to have been about 5 years old. We were in the department store, Now, my mom was sitting at a table looking at sewing patterns, and she told me to sit as well, but I didn't. And I wandered off and saw some kids running up the down escalator and winning. So I thought I'd give it a try as well. Now, the one problem with this adventure back in the old days, the down escalator wasn't always next to the up escalator. It was on the other end of this huge department store. So when I didn't have the quickness that these older kids had, I found myself at the bottom not knowing how to make my way back to my mom. I must have blacked out from the shock, because the next thing I remember, I'm sitting on top of a counter next to a register with a store clerk and my mom coming around the corner to retrieve me. Now, thank goodness for an intercom system and a mom who didn't think that 3 out of 4 wasn't so bad. Here's the second question. Do you know what it feels like to be found? Philip sensed an urgency when it came to Nathanael. And I think, because here's the thing, sometimes you don't even know you're lost until you've been found. Katie didn't know she was lost. She had stopped following me to gaze at a window display, oblivious to the fact that she could have been forever separated from her parents.
I would be sad. I would probably be angry. I would probably have kids who couldn't talk to me. My own kids, just out of my own anger or disappointment in the way that life turns out. So because he found me, because I found him, I have hope. I don't have to stay in sadness. I don't have to be angry, because I know that he is taking care of me.
Have you ever played out the what ifs in your life? I mean, where would you be today? What would your life be like today had Jesus not found you? Some of you would be dead. Some of you would be divorced, drug addicted. The realization of what could have been had you not been found can be pretty sobering. Do you know what it feels like to be found? Philip wanted Nathanael to be found, just like he had been found. And he didn't let Nathanael's skepticism keep him from being lovingly diligent. Think about the ones you ache for because they're lost. It will take time, loving interaction, patient invitations, and consistent prayer. But here's the deal. God loves lost people. And if you have been found, you won't stop wanting to find people. Now, we're talking about sharing the gospel, and it's obviously something we want to get right because we know it's the most important thing we can share with anyone, the gospel, the good news about who Jesus is and what he's done for us. The problem is we don't ever think about how we're going to actually share that, and we can actually mess that up by not getting the gospel right. And so one of our defaults in that is to say, okay, here's the deal, just share your story. Share how God has changed your life. And that's great. It makes it more comfortable for us, and we don't have to be so dogmatic in what we're talking about. We just say, hey, this is what Jesus has done in my life, and I'm a witness, and I'm going to share my testimony of how God has changed my life, and Jesus has changed my life, and that's great. But as we're doing that, we still have to pay attention to getting the gospel right. So instead of figuring out, okay, I'm going to tell my story and work the gospel into it in different places, I think it's better to start with, I'm going to share the gospel, and I'm going to work my story into the basis of the gospel. So you just have the basic points of the gospel. In a lot of cultures, you just have to start with the idea that there is a creator God, and we are accountable to him. So you just start with that truth, that God created the world. He created everything. And because he created everything, his creation is accountable to him. That's just logic. So you start with where did you find that out? Where did you start to figure that out, that there was a creator God? Maybe your parents told you that. But there's somewhere along the way that you realize, yes, there is a God who created me, and because He's the creator, I am accountable to Him. And there's a problem with that. And the problem is that we've rebelled against Him. We've rebelled against His accountability in our lives, and we've said we don't need Him. We've turned our backs on Him. So you just share that naturally. As you are sharing the gospel, you just share how that happened for you, how that played out. I rebelled against God. I decided to try to live my life apart from Him. I tried to do things my way instead of His way. So in that process, I learned that that was a problem, that it had led to a problem between me and God. I didn't have a relationship with Him. It really leads to all the problems that we see in the world today. We've rebelled against the Creator God. So then you move toward the solution, that God provides the only solution in the person of Jesus Christ in His death, burial, and resurrection. When He took my place, He took our place on the cross and took the punishment that we deserve, and that was God providing the only solution to the problem of our rebellion. So then you get to share where that happened for you and how you came to understand that Jesus Christ took your place. He took my place on the cross. He took the punishment that I deserved for my sins and my rebellion toward God. And as you're explaining that, you're telling that story of how you came to understand that Jesus was your only hope. And then that last element of how that becomes personal for you. How did I become included in God's great salvation and His rescue? When I believed in Jesus, when I believed in what He had accomplished for me, when I believed He is the Son of God and that I trusted Him and Him alone for my salvation. So you get to tell that part of the story of when that happened for you. Maybe your parents led you to that point. Maybe it was attending a church service and hearing the gospel message. Maybe it was through a mission team that came. But you share, okay, this is where I believed, and this is what it meant for me to believe. And now that I'm trusting in Jesus and Him alone for my salvation, how that has changed my life. So you shared the gospel, and you worked your story into the basic elements of the gospel. That's an effective way of getting the story and the message right as you share with people your testimony.